Well, I think, do you have to start recording first?
Do you want me to just start recording now and then make you host?
Don't you have to start the recording first and then like record to the cloud and then live on YouTube? Or maybe I don't know if those steps really matter.
I don't think it really matters, but it looks like you're live on YouTube
Perfect.
and you're recording.
Yeah, and then you just make me host again, and then I think we should be good.
Okay.
Have to let the dogs out. He's scratching. I'll be right back.
All right. Does that look good, Kendall?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay. Have a super fun session, friends.
Did you make me host?
I did.
Okay. I just didn't see. Okay, perfect. We're good.
Okay. Bye.
Rose, bye.
And kind of if we have a smaller group, that's okay. I'll just cut the number of slides down, which is totally cool.
Yeah, I think the numbers have been less than what it looked like on the registration, but I think that will be just fine.
Yeah.
I think that was to be expected, knowing that people sign up and it's Saturday and not 100% come, which is really fine. All right, it's 12:45, so we'll go ahead and get started. It's so fun to see some friends that I saw in some old sessions here, so hello again. We are here from 12:45 to 2, and then your fourth and final session will be from 2:15 to 3:30. And so I'm just going to get going and introduce our facilitator for this session. Gwyneth Hughes is a math specialist at the Regional Math Center at Boise State University, and she's been working in math professional development and teacher education for the past 12-ish years, both in Boise State and at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And prior to that, she was a high school math teacher and then studied science. She's in math education because she believes having access to math is really empowering, and she'd like to see many, many, many more students, oh, I apologize for my dogs, see themselves as mathematically capable. And so I'm just gonna let Gwyneth take it away. She's so used to doing professional development, so she is leading this whole thing, and enjoy this session.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Kendall, for the introduction and welcome. Thanks for being willing to talk about math on a Saturday afternoon. I really appreciate you being here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. But first, you can follow along if you want. I'll throw this in the chat. This is just the presentation. If you want to come back to it later, that was also in the materials that they handed out. And then I will share my screen. This one. All right, can I get a thumbs up if you can see that? Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm going to be talking about this simple framework that we use at the Boise State University Regional Math Center that we use for all of the different kinds of professional development we do. And I think it's been really useful in our work, and I wanted to sort of share that. And so what we'll be doing is examining sort of the definition and what a framework is for coaching and PD. I'll talk about our particular framework, which has these two elements of explicit attention to concepts and student opportunity to struggle. And yes, we'll do a little bit of math. I'll talk a little bit about how we actually implement this within different professional development settings. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about just frameworks in general. So this particular framework is just one, but why the general idea of having a framework is so helpful as it relates to coaching. Before we get started, I wanted to just get a sense of who's here. So if you can just throw in the chat, I know you've probably been doing this all day, but it does help, just who you are and where you teach, and yeah, or what your role is as a coach or a teacher.
Hi, I'm Kathy Frank, and I teach at Juvenile Correction Center, and we have a accredited high school in our corrections facility. So our students are locked in a facility, but they have full-time school. And in high school, we get they graduate as well. So we're accredited high school, and I teach math. And Gwyneth, I'm on one of your on the catalyzing change and whatever that.
I was going to say your name is very familiar.
My face looks familiar. So,
another workshop.
Welcome. Yeah,
Thank you.
Another workshop. You know, I'm hope to put this together. Sounds like with that one. I am glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have people. Looks like elementary math coach and Boise school districts. Some of these names I actually know from elsewhere too. So great. Yes, 2 people from the catalyzing change. So thanks both for being here today. So our particular way of thinking about a framework has to do with an underlying foundation that we relate all of our work to. That doesn't mean that there aren't other components of our work, but just something that we can use across all the work we do. And we want it to be based in research or theory. It has to be simple, and it has to be really widely applicable because we work with K-12 across different kinds of areas and such. So I'll talk just a little bit about how we landed on this particular framework because there's lots of different ways to go. And a lot of it has to do with our purpose as the Regional Math Center. So we provide professional development to teachers, coaches, administrators, and we're really looking at these different sort of learning outcomes of students in mathematics. Our big focus is this combination of conceptual and procedural understanding, engaging students in real-world problem solving, building student confidence so they see themselves as mathematically capable. And along with that, that equitable access that we want all students to have, that they can use their mathematical reasoning. So those are our goals just within the Regional Math Center. And then sort of the nitty-gritty components that framed how we chose this particular framework was that it had to be applicable in real classrooms. So it couldn't be sort of too lofty in a way that didn't relate to the real world. It needed to be really flexible for rural classrooms with just a few students or across different grade levels, or sort of Boise School District schools as well. We do a lot of different kinds of professional development, from like state mandated courses that have people who don't even teach math in them, to very focused kind of lesson study work or coaching work. We also needed it to work well with everything else that we're expected to do. So there's other frameworks we use within professional development. There's state goals and standards. And like I said before, it also has to be research-based and simple. So those are kind of the elements that guided our thinking that would look different if you were coaching a more like within a single district, right? Those specifics look different. And so what we landed on is this framework that comes out of the work of Hebert and Groves, which is a really big meta-analysis article that came out in 2007. And what they did is they looked at a whole bunch of studies around what supported students' mathematical ability and growth. And what they found is that there's really, it kind of boils down to these two big ideas: explicitly attending to concepts and giving students opportunity to struggle. And so we really appreciated the simplicity of those two elements, and then how well they work with a lot of other things. This was further researched by Smith et al., which I'll talk a bit about in a minute. So just to go into a little more detail on what that looks like. So explicit attention to concepts is about teachers really support students in connecting between math concepts and the procedures and ideas. And we'll take a look at what that is in a second. And then student opportunity to struggle has to do with students really taking on that cognitive load. They are doing the thinking, they are doing the work, and they're often finding solutions to a problem where the answer is not immediately transparent. So that's the framework we're gonna be kind of focusing on, and that I hope you get kind of familiar with over the course of this. So before I move on, I'm just curious, what do you notice? What do you wonder? Is this similar to what your own mathematical thinking is at this point? We have a few enough people, you can even unmute yourself, or you can put something in the chat. Oh, hi, Margot.
For me, so much of it is like when we design PD, sometimes I think we'll focus on like one and then bring in some of the other, or we'll focus on the other one and bring in some of the other. But for us, it's kind of, we'll lose the balance as we're designing PD. And so like even just looking ahead to where like our district teachers, I think what they need more of is the attention to concepts. Like we're starting to really get the struggle and the pedagogy and doing some of that, but now we need to dial back into the explicit attention to concepts. And so that's just what I'm kind of resonating with me right now, is like that kind of balance. I think is really cool to try to see what you guys have found.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. Those cycles of kind of going back and forth between, I think, is really, yeah, thanks for that point. Anybody else?
I really like the having the students struggle with, they kind of give up on a lot of stuff and not thinking that they can't do it because they have to, because they're struggling. But if they can understand that they're struggling is what's helping them learn, or that's part of it and not a bad thing. So that would be awesome to help my students anyway, to understand that that struggle is part of their learning process. So.
Yeah, exactly. That you actually learn better when you have that opportunity to struggle. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Kathy. Anybody else? I don't want to cut people off.
From my experiences this year being in math classes, I'm either seeing one or the other done really well, but not both together. And so that's our focus for coaching next year, is to bring that all together. So I'm really glad to be here today.
Thanks, Margot. That's great. All right. So we're going to do a little bit of math. Yeah. I'm going to give you a problem, and then let's see how many people. I think we have enough for 2 breakout groups that we can manage there. Yeah. So here's the prompt. Rochelle is making oat bars, but all her measuring cups are in the dishwasher, except the 2/3 cup, the 1/4 cup, and the 3-cup pitcher. So the question is, how could she use these little measuring cups to measure out the ingredients for her oat bar recipe, which is over here? So I'd like you to defend your thinking with a visual and an equation. You can just work on your own paper. I'm going to give you a place to work in a second. But there's one little caveat that helps with this. So she is pretty sure that she can estimate filling up half of any measuring cups she has. And I'm going to say, just for the sake of time, if you can do all of these, but if you want to really just focus on that 2.5 cups one, that's the one we're going to share with other people. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes just on your own to work on this. And then I'll put you into groups while you're working on that. I should say, are there any questions about the prompt before I release you? Okay. All right, so before I put you in your groups, I'm going to give you a few more directions. And you'll have more time to work, don't worry. So once you're in your group, you're going to open up this little shared document. And I'll put that in the chat too. So go ahead and open that up while you're in the whole group so you have access to the chat. And then what you're going to do is navigate. You're going to be in one of 2 groups when this opens up. And once you're in your group, find which group you are. So if you're in your group 1, you're going to go to the group 1 slides. If you're in group 2, go ahead to the group 2 slides. Looks like I erased one too many. And then I've put the prompt on those shared slides. And the idea is that within your group, you're going to share a couple ways that you discuss and put onto the slides. So you're welcome to take a picture of your work and put it on there. You're welcome to use the tools in Google Slides, whatever works for you. I'm going to give you we're doing great. Okay, we're about 8 minutes in your work groups to put that work in and then talk a little bit about the differences in your strategies. Okay, or similarities and differences in your strategies. Before I let you go into those groups, are there any questions? Everybody know what they're doing? Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna open all the rooms. I didn't notice the breakout rooms have a 5-minute. That's fine. we'll bring them back.
Here, maybe I'll go into room 1 just so the recording is following me.
Yeah, that would be great. Hello, Heather. Sorry. I didn't see you. They're in breakout rooms right now if you just want to hold tight for a second or two.
Just a sec, yeah. I have to get my video started anyway.
Okay, no problem. Sorry, I was watching them put their work into the slides and didn't see you pop in.
Oh, no, that's okay. Oh, there we go.
There you go, perfect. And where
How's
are
it
you?
going? Is it going
Pretty
well?
good. It's going well,
Good.
thanks.
Good.
And I just dropped the presentation and the shared slides in there so you can access those if you want.
Okay, so is this Kindle's presentation?
This is my presentation.
This is yours. So
Yeah, I was coming back to they're going to come back in 1 minute from their breakout rooms.
I'm sorry, Gwyneth, I am presenting at 1:15 and this is the link it took me to.
Oh. Well, let me bring them back so that Kendall can navigate you. Because
There you go. Okay.
she's here. She's just in one of the breakout rooms.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. I don't know what the, okay. All right, so before we go on, I'm gonna have Kendall talk to Heather because this is where she's supposed to be presenting too.
This is the link my presentation took me to for 1:15.
1:15. Okay. Do you mind here? Do you mind putting us in a breakout room, Heather and I? Then we're not distracting.
Thank you. Sorry,
Yeah.
Gwyneth.
No problem at all. Okay, there you go. And then Kendall, you can just join that one. Okay, perfect. Okay. So thanks for playing with my math problem. I wanted to give you just a little bit of experience. I'm actually going to use some student work I collected before, but I wanted to share what the groups had done so far. I'll just move all you over here. Okay. So group one, it looks like, do any of you want to talk a little bit about what you did or compare your different strategies?
Yeah.
We had the one,
Go ahead, Kathy.
the one that did the 3 cups and then took away 2 1/4 cups.
Sorry.
And then we had adding all of them at 1/4 all the way to get 3.5. And then, 2.5. And then we had one where we took the 2/3 cup and made 3 of those to get 2, and then did 2 1/4 cups to add up to 1/2.
Perfect, thank you. So you sort of had 3 different ways looking at using the same unit versus kind of taking 1/4 cups out versus taking that 2/3 and repeating it. And then I think one of those was similar to group 2. How is anything you did there similar?
That is the one we were from group 2. That's what we
that
did.
was group 2.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
We only got one picture done.
You had all 3 of those within your group. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, it worked out well because those are the 3 ways I was hoping for. I'm going to use some student work that I gathered from students. And maybe unsurprisingly, they did pretty much the same thing. So I'll give you just a chance to look for a second. And this one came from a college student, but these are from kids. And so what I would do at this point is really start to focus in on my goal for this task. So my goal for this task is really to make sure students can use fraction equivalence to solve problems before they've had formal addition and subtraction with fractions with unlike denominators. So they're thinking about equivalence and how to trade out, say, fourths for halves or combine those 2/3. So I might ask some additional questions like, where do we see the 2 full cups in each representation? Where do we see the half cup in each representation? How do we know, for example, in this one, that 3 2/3 cups is the same as 2 cups? So I might pose those questions to students and make sure that they are able to really articulate things like that 2/3 cup consists of 2 1/3 cups, and there are 3 1/3 cups and 1 whole cup. So sort of what we call unitizing, moving back and forth between different units. So that would be my goal. Hold on one second. I have a very old cat who gets confused about our whereabouts and is very loud. So given this task now that we've kind of gone through a very short abbreviated process of what this might look in a classroom, I wanted to ask what aspects of this facilitation meet each of these 2 components. There's the student opportunity to struggle and the explicit attention to concepts. And of course, I didn't give a lot of time for either of those pieces, but I'm wondering if you can share again in the chat or just in muting where you saw those 2 components in what we just did.
I saw our struggle was mainly trying to do the picture to give back our information. And we all seem to, it's amazing, come up with 3 different ideas. It was trying hard to post it.
Yeah, in this kind of setting, it's a little tougher to show that quickly. Yeah.
Somebody in our group actually mentioned that this might be a good alternative for some of their kiddos who have a harder time with like, when do you really need to be precise and when do you not? So like 2nd graders being like, my lines aren't perfect and like things like that. That kind of is the struggle it takes away from the content. And so having maybe another platform to do it was kind of cool. But yeah, I think it was also neat how we all, I mean, I guess we all know fractions, but we all kind of like knew what each other was talking about. So even when we were doing the pictures, we were like, oh, that's this way. Oh, that's this way. And that was kind of cool also.
Yeah, that's nice, being able to connect the picture with the strategy and like kind of make that connection within your groups. Nice, thanks.
Yeah, the directions on having to use like a visual method was really kind of cool just to see all of the math equations broke down so visually.
Yeah, so that's sort of those key components of explicit attention to concepts. So there's the component of, well, first I gave you the opportunity to struggle, right? So there wasn't a correct way to do this problem. There's correct answers, but there's not just one way. And so you really have to kind of think about it. The one where it's taking away the quarter cups, where is that one? This one. This is actually what my son did this morning. And he wanted to take away quarter cups all the way back to 2 and then as he was taking away those quarter cups, suddenly realized like, oh, that's too many. So that was his, like, you could see the struggle for a real third grader of being like, what, how do I get to 2? And then where's the half? That kind of idea. And then the explicit attention to concepts comes when we connect those representations. When we say, where is the 2? Why does the 3 2/3 equal 2 full cups? That's really where we're getting at that explicit attention to concepts. So what I'm going to do is actually to kind of get more at this idea of these 2 different constructs, I'm going to have you do a little card sort. So there's specific things as coaches and teachers we can do that help students attend to the concepts. And the big deal with this is that we're really making those concepts. Just realized, I am sharing my screen. Sorry, my green line goes away when I present. We really want to make those explicit and public. So not hiding the concepts, but being really clear about what we are trying to get at. For opportunity to struggle, we're really making sure students are engaging with the mathematics and they are taking on that cognitive load. So what I'm going to do is put you into breakout groups. Excuse me. And I'm going to give you directions. I'm not sure the easiest way to, I'll give the directions first and then I'll show you what the cards look like. So there's going to be 12 cards that each name different moves that you can do as a teacher that are associated either with explicit attention to concepts or student opportunity to struggle. And so your job in your group is to sort those cards into those 2 categories. And you'll just be either copying and pasting or cutting and pasting your cards. But here is the catch, is that you can only move your cards. And you will need to figure out as a group how to sort the cards together. So you're gonna find a number for yourself and those will be your cards. To find your number, when you go into groups, order your names alphabetically, A to Z, and then use that order to give people different cards. So I think there's only 3 of you in each group, and that's fine. But just assign yourselves cards based on your group. So here's what it looks like in the shared slides. So you'll go back into groups 1 and 2. The directions are there on that slide. So you have one slide that's just the 2 constructs. And then you have another slide that has all of the different moves. And so your job in your group is to assign yourselves some numbers. And then those are the ones that you're going to copy and paste and move around to where you think they go. You can also cut and paste whatever is easy for your group. Okay. And I somehow managed to get rid of group 2s. There we go. All right. So for this, I'm going to give you until about 1:30. I'm in a different time zone. Until about 1:30, and then I will call you back. Do you have any questions before I send you out? I'll put the shared slides in the chat again, just in case. Okay. And I just realized I remade the groups, so I don't know what groups you were in, so you're going to have new friends. Oh, no, you've auto-populated. Okay, off you go. All right, welcome back. This is actually really interesting to watch because your two groups had, I think, almost opposite ways of grouping them, which is totally fine. The point was not so much that there's right answers here, but more to engage you in that conversation around these two ideas. So I'm going to just share my screen and sort of show the differences between. Okay. So group one, I noticed that you have a couple in the middle, and I was wondering if you wanted to talk about the ones that you had closer to the middle and if that meant something, and if not, that's okay too, but I thought I'd ask.
All right, I guess I will jump in on that one. I think we were wondering on some of these if it was teacher-led or student-led. So for example, exploring the main idea of a lesson, is that being led by a teacher more explicitly making the connections, or is it more open-ended that those students were taking on themselves? So maybe just kind of a quandary for a few of us looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it's sort of, I guess you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, that it kind of depends on who's responsible for doing that. So if it's a teacher going through the process of making all these connections, that's sort of that concept, attending the concepts. But if a student is having to go through that, that would be an opportunity to struggle. Is that what I'm?
Yeah, thank you. I think I read my wrong post-it, but that was the gist of it.
Yeah, so that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So that's a really good point, is who's doing that. And if the student is taking on a lot of cognitive load, then that would be an opportunity to struggle. I think in a lot of these are more like what the teacher is doing. So if we think about a teacher connecting across multiple representations or asking questions like I was doing to connect across multiple representations, they're being intentional about a specific concept. But I really appreciated the way you voiced that, Leslie. That was really nicely done. Thank you. And then group two, were there any ones that I don't know, stumped you, or that you wanted to kind of go back and address, or anything that came up during your conversation?
We had a few that we thought that could be either or both. So we had a hard time at first, and then we got kind of the hang of it and saw kind of a pattern that we thought we saw there. So that kind of helped us in a way. But there were several that we thought could be on both.
Yeah, nice. So sort of building on what Leslie said about kind of depends who's doing it and where it goes. So this actually was put together by the Root Project at Boise State University. I'm going to put a link in the chat to the handout from that project. So you can think of it as the answer key if you want to, but I'm not going to make it like the be all end all answer. But this is the framework that they really use when they're working with teachers. This is a big NSF grant. Right now they're working mostly with middle school teachers. And so that's where these elements came from. So if you look at the background literature about where these two constructs came from, this is kind of the way those researchers describe each of these different constructs. With that said, of course, in doing any of these things, you can give students more opportunity to struggle, or you can really draw out concepts. And so both are really embedded in a lot of these practices. So that's for you to keep and laminate or do what you will. Okay. So just a little bit on what we know about these two different constructs. So they really looked, there's a study by Stein et al. In 2017, if you're familiar with Smith and Stein's work, where they looked at classrooms where students had the opportunity for struggle and classified that as high versus low, like they didn't have the opportunity to struggle versus they did. And then same thing with explicit attention to concepts. Did classrooms really attend to concepts or not? And then they put the classrooms into these 4 quadrants based on those two different qualities. And so it's interesting to kind of think about what this looks right? Like I think about having been in classrooms where there was a high opportunity to struggle, but maybe a low attention to concepts, right? The kids were like really engaged in some activity. They were really solving something, having good discussion, but then that didn't kind of get put into like a learning target or specific. Or we can see it the other way too, where we might have high explicit attended concepts, but low opportunity to struggle. So this would be like my high school calculus class, where Miss Barnes was like awesome at explaining things really clearly, but we never had to sort of take on the struggle of the cognitive load of the class. So those are the 4 quadrants we're going to look at. And so within this study, they administered 2 different tests to those students. One was a more traditional test, and one was a more conceptual test. And what's fascinating is the difference that we've shortened them to EAC and high SOS really outperforms the other groups pretty substantially on both, but especially on that more like problem solving kind of test. And so that's really notable within this work. So I just wanted to share a little bit of the research. I can share the paper, or it's down here. The paper is cited in there. So just a little bit about how we implement the framework at the Regional Math Center. We have these different kinds of PD. So we have state mandated courses, like if you've had to take the TMT class or the MTI class, we administer those. We have interactive teaching modules. So those are like more content specific. And then we have the Math Leadership Network, where we work with coaches or just teacher leaders. And then we have these lesson study cycles. So if you're familiar with lesson study, that's small groups of teachers who are coming up with a question and observing each other in classrooms and developing lessons together. And so this same explicit attention to concepts and student opportunities to struggle framework can help us with all of those and developing resources for all of those. So for example, when we do these, well, I'll just talk about a little bit. So when we do these state mandated courses and interactive teaching modules, we engage teachers in activities like that fraction one, where they have that opportunity for themselves. And then we kind of explicitly talk about that. Within the Math Leadership Network, we do these kinds of workshops like we're doing right now, like that you are in, and then people take that back to the coaching that they do. And then within lesson studies, it's often influences the questions that they develop. So just a little bit about what that looks like. So whenever we're designing professional development for that kind of larger content scale, we're engaging the teachers we work with in these kinds of problems that allow them to struggle and to explicitly attend to concepts. And so they do the problems, and then we really try and point those elements out within our facilitation. Within the lesson study cycle, the goal that they identify is often really tied to one or the other or both of these. So how do we know that students can identify and understand key concepts from a lesson is one where that's a big goal. It also really helps us observe in classrooms and helps the teachers we work with observe in classrooms, because we can sort of say, in this moment, am I more explicitly attending to concepts, or am I more allowing students to struggle? And what does that mean for what my next move in the classroom? And then I'm just going to end with just a little bit about selecting a framework in general, because this certainly isn't the only one. And then I'll give you some time to kind of talk in groups, and then we can finish up. So again, advantages to having a framework. It provides a structure, and it really gives us coherence across opportunities. So it's fun to have Margot here, because I feel like she's been in many different opportunities where this is a focus of all of them, right? And so it also meets people at different points in their careers. So we can have people just starting within their careers, and it's applicable, but it's also applicable to people who are still kind of grappling with these questions later in their careers. I have this clarifies what we can say no to. That's more as like a math center that might not apply as much to individual coaches. But there's a couple different types of frameworks that people use. So some people really focus on classroom practices. Some people focus on material. Some people are focusing on really specific content. And so there's other frameworks that are out there. There's the dimensions of equity. So thinking about whether a particular task empowers students or grows their math identities. Or there's like these professional noticing ones that are more about looking at really specific student work. So if you're engaging in that kind of student work, review of student work, that's a really nice one to use. And then both of these can be used with other frameworks as well. So I'm going to put you back. I'm going to give you like a couple minutes, I think, to think. And then I'll put you into your breakout groups. So a few questions you might kind of ponder for a minute is, how do you currently frame your coaching or PD, or what frameworks are you thinking about? Where might you find a framework, or how might you develop one if you don't have one already, or if the EACSOS one doesn't work for you? And then just thinking about what kind of considerations you might have as you're developing or choosing a framework. So I'll give you like 2 minutes just to think about that and kind of write down some notes, and then I'll put you back in your groups. Okay, so I'm going to put you in your groups, and I'd love if you can just share either an answer to one of those questions or anything else that's kind of floating around in your head right now. If you go to the shared slides and you go to that last slide, there's a little space where your group can just type some ideas or anything that comes up in your conversation. I'll just drop those in the chat again in case. Yeah, and I'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes in your groups to do that. And you're back. All right, so just to kind of wrap up, did anything come out in your groups or questions that you might have for me, or I don't know, ending ideas that came up?
I'll share. I guess for me, I'm in this session today because I teach first grade, and our building right now is kind of evaluating whether we want to put our resources more toward reading intervention and less with math. And we're very heavy on we have great PD for a lot of best practice in reading, but we've never really had any PD opportunities in math. Yet our building is identified number sense as like that priority standard we want to see grow K-5. So for me, I just wanted to learn a little bit more about what I could do to support my building and my colleagues and students, and maybe make a bit of a shift in our viewpoint on math.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie.
Yeah, we have a bunch of schools we serve, and we just kind of realized that we don't necessarily have a consistent amount of time that the schools are spending on math in their buildings. And so now that's happening. Well, next year, they don't know this yet, but supposedly that's going to be a thing that happens. And so we're figuring out, how do we support teachers with, how do you fill the time? And which, I mean, to me is like, oh, I get more time, but not to everybody. And one of our group members brought up, she kind of was saying like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I'm not a math teacher. I'm not in their space. And one of the things that we've thought is kind of going to be hopefully an opportunity we have to help support this is getting everybody in the room when we're doing our math PD, hopefully with them, like the principal, the school counselor, the ESL teacher, the music teacher, who is probably now going to be potentially running and helping support a group, you know, like, I don't know. We've noticed the same thing. There's been a lot of reading support for a while that's been very specific in schools. We have a reading specialist in each school, but like, I'm now the only secondary math coach. So we'll find out how that goes with everybody. But yeah, so.
Yeah, thank you to you both. That's a really helpful way to see where people are and where districts are. I think one thing that's really overwhelming about math is like where to start, because if like we used to try and do things around like the practice standards, right? And there's 7 of them, or no, there's 8 of them, and they're kind of complicated, right? And so like, that's kind of a lot to take on. And we found that just having these 2 things and everything kind of comes back to these 2 things has been really helpful. The other thing I was going to say, there's a really nice book by Confer and Ramirez. I will try and find it. But one of the things I talk about is getting exactly what, like you said, getting everyone in the school involved in math and professional development. And it's called Small Steps, Big Changes, 8 Essential Practices for Transforming Schools Through Mathematics. And so they sort of talk about using math as a way to work on school transformation, not just in mathematics, but in sort of community building as well. So I just dropped the name of that book into the chat. That's great, thank you both. Anything else? All right. I'm gonna drop my contact info in here. If you are not in Region 3, I can also connect you with the person who is your regional math specialist, depending on where you are. And otherwise, I think that's all I have for today, unless people have questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much,
Gwyneth.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so everyone, your next session is 2:15, so you have a little bit of break time between, so feel free to enjoy some your you time, whatever that may be, and yeah, enjoy your session 4. And thank you so much, Gwyneth. It was really fun to be a part of.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you guys.
Bye, nice to meet you. I'll see some of you in a couple of weeks.
And Gwyneth, since you're here, can I ask you a question if that's okay? I joined a colleague of mine at the high school invited me to some kind of a conversational night in math a couple of weeks ago. And then I have information about the teacher leader community.
Yeah.
And I signed up to do a Zoom link because I'm in McCall, but I was just curious, can you share a little bit more about what that is, if this space is appropriate, or direct me where I could read a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. I can tell you a little bit about that. So it's an ongoing